in the perfect world, we want to feel like by satisfying our employees, we'll satisfy our customers, we'll satisfy our investors. And the tricky part is that almost never happens, at least not at the same time. And time is sometimes a big deal. I'll talk about that more on the next slide. By no means am I suggesting that in strategy you can stiff long-term one of these stakeholder groups and have things turn out nicely. You have to take care of your employees. You have to take care of your customers, and you have to take care of your investors, or bad things are going to happen. But there will be crises. And sometimes Mr. or Ms. CEO is going to have to decide whose needs they deal with immediately and who do they react to. So how do you go about doing that? There's an interesting model that helps you sort out who you have to listen to or where you have to make your trade-offs. And this works in a lot of different situations. There are three elements to consider. The first is raw power. There are some entities that always have power. The shareholders always have a lot of power because they are in fact the owners of the company and all that goes with that. Key customers almost always have a lot of power. So if I rely on a customer for a good chunk of my business and they say this is what needs to be, then probably it's going to have to be that way. Regulators almost always have a lot of power. So power is just the simple, boom, I can make you do it or you're going to get punched in the mouth. The second two, or the remaining two, are more subtle and are key to making this thing work and really understanding how the world works. The second is what they call urgency, and it's kind of poorly named because urgency sounds like what happens next. It's really not what happens next, is who's really excited about this. We know the cliche, let a sleeping dog lie. That's the example of urgency. The dog has power, but they're asleep. They have no urgency on the issue. So sometimes you'll have powerful stakeholders that on this particular issue are disengaged. They don't care. They have very low urgency. And so that will cause you to reduce the emphasis you have to place on that stakeholder. The next is legitimacy. So let's say someone who has low power, a lot of urgency, do I still have to pay attention to them? It depends on how much legitimacy they're likely to have with their argument. And basically the legitimacy means, can this relatively powerless but very excited stakeholder group convince other stakeholder groups that might have more power that they should be excited about this too? So are people likely to side with them? Are they likely to get emotional about something? In other words, the legitimacy addresses the issue of, can these less powerful people drag in more powerful people on their side? Three questions to ask yourself as you rack and stack the various stakeholders. How much power do they have? How urgent are they, or how interested or how worked up are they about the issue? And do they have legitimacy such that I think they can engage other stakeholder groups on their side? Because trade-offs are typically necessary, I don't expect anybody to walk away going, yeah, there's trade-offs and I'm happy about that. Particularly the younger, more idealistic among us are likely to say, no, we can do everything in all cases. It just doesn't seem to work out that way. So I expect you to fight trade-offs, and where you're going to really see trade-offs is in the business strategy game. And I expect some of you are going to have a really hard time making the necessary trade-offs to succeed. And you're going to find if you don't succeed. And if you make the wrong trade-offs, you won't succeed there either. But they're usually necessary, not always. And this gets into the time constraints too. This is one of the major concerns a CEO has to deal with of a public company. Do I have the time to do what I think needs to be done? In the fall of 2013, the Dell Corporation was approved to go private. What can Dell do as a private company that couldn't do as a public company? Michael Dell's position was, it's going to take me several years to turn this company around, and I need to have patient investors, i.e. non-public investors, who are going to understand it takes 2 to 3 years and are not going to tie me to the quarterly earnings phone call with the analysts. And so that's what he's saying is in the short term, things are going to be bad, but I think in the long term, they're going to be rosy. And in a publicly traded company, in the short term, things bad, that model doesn't work very well. So let me sum up this first chapter. This idea of strategies, it's a ton of fun because it's dynamic, and the goal is to outperform your rival firms forever. It never works that way, but that's what you want. Because it is real companies doing real things, nothing lasts forever. The textbook talks about it as a set of analysis, decisions, and actions, which I think is a very useful way to look at it. And Porter describes it differently, but also in a very useful way. Strategy at its core is about picking a position, consciously making the trade-offs necessary, and then enforcing fit so that you, as effectively and efficiently as possible, implement those decisions. We've talked about the value of direction. Not a huge believer in mission and vision statements per se, but I'm a huge believer in knowing what you're trying to accomplish, motivating people to get around that, and the like. And then lastly, this idea of stakeholders. Who are they? How do I balance the interests? So, it's going to be great. Thanks for being along for the ride.